Welcome to week 7, everyone. It's amazing that we are already there. It feels like we're on week 2. But with that being said, it is week 7. We, of course, start every week talking about the quarterbacks. But before Jim and I get there, I want to let you know, and let me get this image up on screen for you since I am always, it always takes me a while to do this. Here we go. I'll give you. I don't even have it up yet. That just shows how technologically savvy I am. But let me start telling you about what it is. It's the RotoCurve trial package for NFL. Of course, you get all the wonderful things with RotoCurve included, like red zone utilization, all the articles from all of us. You get the ownership percentage. You get just about everything that your heart would possibly desire, including those optimized DFS lineups for both DraftKings and FanDuel. Legitimately all the tools. That's rotocurve.com/free hyphen trial, rotocurve.com/free trial. It is amazing that we're still giving this away for free, which proves that your economics teacher in high school was wrong when he said that there is nothing free in this world, because this package is absolutely free. Jim, let's start with you with quarterbacks this week. Is there any free money at the quarterbacks?
It seems like there could be. Last week, I know we had some trouble identifying that middle portion of value. It was either pay up or pay down. It looked like paying down. We both talked before the show, but Tyrod Taylor was really nice. I think this is a week actually where the middle looks good again. In cash games, I think it's going to be pretty obvious, but so far the trends haven't been very positive for Andy Dalton and the Bengals. Last year he was 4th in touchdown rate, which is to say, the percentage of touchdowns per attempt, he was over 6%, which is really high. This year he's below 3%, which is awful, and he's 28th in the league. But then again, entered the Cleveland Browns, right? The cross-state rivals. I don't know if they're rivals if you always beat them, but either way, here's the thing. The Cleveland has allowed 16 passing touchdowns through 6 games. That's the second most that they've allowed since the 1970 merger. That's a bad team. It's not like we're talking about a good defense in decline. This is a team that's always been bad, at least historically, and so this is historically bad for an historically bad franchise. But hey, they have the Cavs and Indians, so they can't complain. The other thing is they've given up at least 2 touchdowns in 9 straight games. Only the Lions have a streak as long as that. So the floor is just really high here. Tyler Eifert's practicing. I don't know if you saw, Marvin Lewis was like cheesing throughout the press conference. Reporters said it was the happiest they've ever seen him. I think that means they realize what an important offensive cog that is. Because in the red zone, if you just bracket A.J. Green, it looks like you can shut down this Cincinnati offense. So I think there's a really nice cost certainty here, and the ceiling's actually pretty high because we've seen a lot of quarterbacks kind of reach their zenith against the Browns this year. Mariota with 4 touchdowns, obviously Brady 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's just a team that you beat up on. Everybody's pretty much put up 17 or more fantasy points against Cleveland. If you're going to pay up, I know you have a guy that you want to pay up for. I'm going to pay up for Tom Brady. I know he's on the road, but look, Pittsburgh has one of the weakest pass rushes. They only pressured Tannehill twice last week on 32 dropbacks, the lowest pressure rate of Tannehill's career. Cameron Hayward's hurt for them. They have no pass rush like we established. They obviously don't have a very good rush defense because they gave up 200-plus yards to Jay Ajayi. But I really think this is obviously a passing offense with New England. And here's the thing. Here's some cool Brady stats that I can read off. This is in our rosters piece this week. And it's some data that I pulled from a database. But it's Brady's not thrown an interception any of his last 5 games against the Steelers. That goes back to 2005. I think Adam Pfeiffer was like 7 or something when that last happened. Brady's averaging 300 yards and has thrown 24 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in his last 10 games against the Steelers. So I know that the personnel changes, but he just has their number. He knows Pittsburgh's scheme. The other thing is Pittsburgh's scheme under Keith Butler is the same scheme as Dick LeBeau's kind of zone blitz, situation. So even though the personnel is different over the years of these trends, it's still the same approach in a lot of ways of how to get your reads. The other thing is, he's averaged a touchdown on 9.7 attempts against them. He's only averaged more touchdowns against the Titans over his career. So everything matches up well. It's almost like a DVP thing, right? Like a batter, like Goldschmidt versus who's that pitcher for the Giants? That Lincecum. It's just a home run waiting to happen here. So those are the 2 guys. If I'm paying up, I also love Alex Smith. It's just the Saints thing. You don't need to overprice that. The Saints are giving up 2.66 points per drive and a touchdown on 31% of opposing drives, both the highest rates in the league. I know I just went on a huge rant, but those three players are guys that I'm targeting.
That's okay. We love hearing your rants here on this show, and I want to put out there for the record that I was not aware that Adam Pfeiffer was above 7 years old at this point, so that was news to me. I thought that was his birthday was coming up for number 8.
It might be.
Let me first start with a disappointing talk. Let me kind of bum out here because Joe Flacco coming out with the sore shoulder was really the way that I wanted to go this week. But I don't like hearing that sort of downside for cash games this week. Obviously, if a guy can't heave the ball as far as he wants to, there is some potential downside there against the Jets. I know Palmer struggled against them, but he's leading the league in attempts. He's attempted at least 40 passes. If it turns out his shoulder's fine, I'm still going with him in tournaments. That was going to be the guy I built around in cash games. But you mentioned Dalton. I think he's definitely the starting point for cash games. Otherwise, if you need that extra $100 or you just like this guy better, I think Kirk Cousins is right there with him in terms of, the bargain around it's 6,000 on DraftKings, and I really like the matchup for him. I mean, Detroit is tougher on the run, and meanwhile they've given up 17 passing touchdowns. It's a ridiculous number so far.
The same stats I said. They've given up a touchdown on 31% of drives. It's just they're the Saints, right? So.
Exactly. 17 touchdowns. They've allowed the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. They'll be playing in a dome. I don't think Matt Jones is projected to have such a big game. So if he's going to be a little bit more quiet, and Jordan Reed's going to be active, which is what it's looking like at this point. Cousins is loaded with options. We'll get to it at receivers. We'll get to it in stacks. I think this game bodes awfully well for Cousins. I actually think Washington's in a good spot to even win this game. So Kirk Cousins, a guy who's throwing the ball a ton. He's attempted 226 passes to this point, which is tied for 6th with Roethlisberger. So he's heaving the ball. I think there's a good guy to start with in cash games. Then for tournaments, let's go to some other options. I mentioned Flacco. Matt Ryan's just a machine right now. It's time to start believing in him. He went for 335 and 3 last week against the Seahawks and the Broncos the week before. These are two of the best defenses against opposing quarterbacks. And now they've got the San Diego Chargers allowing 280 yards a game to opposing quarterbacks. So I think you can just expect Ryan at home to light this team up. Julio Jones is going to be covered by, Steve Williams. And he's going to move around the formation. But, that's a favorable matchup for him. We found out a few weeks ago against the Panthers that if he's not squaring off against an elite corner, he definitely possesses the possibility to go off. And the last one I like is both quarterbacks in this game. I actually think Blake Bortles is cash viable as well. But this Oakland team is right there with the Lions in terms of a terrible secondary. I know Amerson's playing some good football, but Bortles, if he doesn't get it done this week, then there really is something wrong with him. But I think he has a really high floor against Oakland. I don't think they'll be able to get the running game going yet again. So they'll have to rely on passing the ball. And this Oakland defense has been pretty susceptible to receivers. 1,230 yards is the most yards receiving to opposing receivers with 7 touchdowns. So, we've kind of been waiting for that Allen Robinson breakout game. I know he dropped the touchdown last week, but I think this is a week we can expect close to 100 yards from both him and Allen Hurns. I just submitted my rankings for RotoCurve. I've got this stack as my favorite of the week. I think you could use Bortles in cash. I think Dalton's maybe a bit safer, but flip the coin between those two. And then in tournaments, Bortles is definitely my preference there. I think he has a big week. Did we miss anyone at the quarterback position this week, Jim?
It's possible you can go back to the Tyrod Taylor well, I think. Just leading the league in rushing yards among quarterbacks, just that floor of rushing. And then like we talked about, Rex Ryan too, they're not a team that's afraid to run the score up. Not like they're always in that position, but they run a fairly aggressive scheme in that sense, and they go downfield. Again, the personnel isn't great in the passing game in Buffalo, but I think Miami that last week was like an aberration. That was really just the Pittsburgh Steelers felling themselves. I don't think Miami does anything special. They're also missing their best playmaker in the secondary. Rashad Jones is out for the year, so I don't know. I just think it's a thing. Again, his price doesn't really shift much. It's still so cheap. that just if you're going to pay down in tournaments and load up on skill players, I don't think you give up a ton with him. Another guy that I'm intrigued with that, like, they look, the Tampa Bay Bucks have been terrible. Like, people aren't mentioning this enough that after that first game, they were terrible. They've been terrible. But what do you think? I don't know. We talked about this before getting on. Like, we want to target against San Francisco. They offer the best time of possession to opponents. You know, we've seen the Chip Kelly effect in terms of what it does. He doesn't play complimentary football. It's basically Kaepernick. It's like naked Kaepernick out there, right? There's no Carlos Hyde. So it just reads to me like Tampa could have the ball all day. You know, I know they're going to run, but it just seems like a situation where he could get 3 touchdowns, Winston, and probably have low ownership, you know, as it comes, especially coming off a bye with no recency to drive it. What do you think about Winston? Is that
Yeah, the thing that worried me was the return of Martin, and it's not really looking all that likely. I guess, missing practice today. We'll see tomorrow. But I think with Jacquizz Rodgers, I would feel a lot better about him. I think if Martin's back, they're going to pound the football. I still think, Winston could be productive, but I'm not sure he has that upper echelon ceiling because teams like to pound the ball and kind of dominate time of possession against this team. But if Rodgers is the guy in the back, in the backfield. I know they pounded him the other day, but I think they'd have no choice but to go to the air. And, you got to like the Winston Evans connection. But I see the thinking there. I just think it's a little dependent on the guy who's in the backfield. And maybe, even on Martin's health. If Martin doesn't look good from the start, then the game flow could change.
right?
So that's my take there. Other guys that I want to mention is just one-offs in tournaments. I do think that Oakland-Jacksonville game could turn into a shootout. That Oakland running game just not getting it done. So Derek Carr has to throw all day long. Jacksonville is susceptible. Matt Stafford at home. This is a guy who set a record for the most yards through his first 100 games. The guy's always a shot for 300 and multiple touchdowns. Washington does not really scare me. And the other one, I think that if you're absolutely punting a quarterback, now that we know that Carlos Hyde is unlikely, maybe Colin Kaepernick against Tampa, just because they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. We know he can run the ball. It's not the safest play in the world. It's only, again, for tournaments. But, if it's Mike Davis and Sean Drone, I don't think that's a sure thing by any means. Did we cover everything, Jim?
I believe we have. I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive quarterback slate here. It's not a bad quarterback slate at all. So.
Yeah, it's one where I think a lot of them are going to come with reasonable ownership percentages where you're not going to have too many guys over 15%. So it should be interesting. Use some of those other guys. I think if you're multi-lineuping, I think it's a great week for multi-lineuping and a good week for cash games if you focus on the guys we said. But before we go, let me just reiterate, we've got this NFL trial. It is, of course, rotocurve.com/free-trial. And it includes all the great things that you're used to with the premium memberships. I kind of butchered it in the opening, but it's exclusive position rankings, projections, cheat sheets, tools like DVP rankings, points per attempt, red zone, optimized lineups, access to player ownership percentage, pretty much anything you would like. Again, that's rotocurve.com/free trial. Give it a look. We will be back in a few minutes or, whenever you click on that next video with the running backs.